In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, 3 brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome, all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. Welcome to the show where we watch movies and then talk about them. Today, I am your host, Russell Guest, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host from right here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Chad Robinson. How are you doing, sir?
It's a beautiful rainy day here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, now, we're going to go way, way, way back, and to join us, we're going to have a first-time guest. Isn't that pretty exciting?
That's always exciting, Russell.
Yes, you sound very excited.
I am. This is my excited voice.
All right, and Peter Warden from the Retro Reviews podcast is joining us today. Peter, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's nice to talk to both of you and happy to be here.
Now, if Retro Review sounds familiar, you're noticing that there's been some crossover action before here. Your co-host, Ray Castillo, came on the show last summer and did Singing in the Rain with us, and we had a good time there. And then I got to come join you guys around Christmas time, and we did Scrooged on your show. So this is helping to complete the picture a little bit. And Peter, welcome to Retro Movie Roundtable.
Thank you. Yes, happy to be here, and thanks for coming on to our show too. That was a really fun episode, and I've heard Ray's Singing in the Rain episode as well, and it was really cool to hear that. I love the crossover, and looking forward to seeing what we dig out of this.
Yeah, so you're from San Francisco. You have your own podcast, Retro Reviews. Why don't you tell people a little bit what Retro Reviews is all about?
Well, Retro Reviews, we've been doing it for about 2 years now. Basically, we look at a movie from our childhood. Well, that's kind of how we outline it, movies from our childhood. Sometimes we talk about movies we haven't even seen before, but we talk about movies that are as old as 1980 and as new as 10 years ago. So basically from 1980 to 2010. We're up to 2010 now because time just moves right by. It was 2008 when we started. So it's a lot of fun just digging into the past. We talk about movies that we've seen 100 times and movies that we may have just seen once or twice as a young kid and just seeing how they hold up today. And we have continued pretty much at a nonstop pace every week for the last 2 years, and it's been a lot of fun. And Ray and I have been friends for a long time, and he's a great person to work with. So.
I notice how you guys sometimes challenge yourselves by going back and aggressively going after movies that you know didn't hold up sometimes.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, there's a movie which I feel like still to this day is incredibly popular, but I just had to bring it out and just like kind of give it a beat down. And it was Wedding Crashers, which I just had a lot of fun really talking about because it's just a movie I've never really appreciated. And I just had to say, okay, 15 years later, what does it look like now? And we were not fans of that. But generally, I feel like I give out, I'm constantly doing movies that I know I love. So I try every now and then to, well, hopefully more so this year. We're trying to do it more and more, like go to movies that we're pretty sure we aren't going to be fans of, or movies that we have no idea about, instead of just movies that we know we love. So there's we're kind of going all over the map right now. And even though we only have a 30-year time span, there's just so much to look at in those 30 years and so much that has changed in filmmaking since then in just the last 10 years. So it's really fun to explore all of that.
Peter, getting to know you a little bit more, what is the last movie you saw?
I already went back and watched for a second time because I loved it so much, and that was Uncut Gems from the Safdie brothers. I thought it was completely egregiously snubbed at the Oscars. I think it's, Adam Sandler proving, as far as I'm concerned, proving again that he's a fantastic actor despite his reputation for doing a lot of really below really like subpar, like ground level work. He really has grown and matured as an actor in a really wonderful way. And yeah, folks, if you haven't seen that movie, it did pretty well at the box office. I feel like a lot of people have seen it, but if you haven't, that is just it is just a spellbinding and wildly intense experience from start to finish. For a movie that on paper doesn't sound like it would be that exciting. It's just about a guy who basically has not a gambling problem. Well, kind of, yeah, like a gambling problem. A guy who's like just obsessed with like getting to the next score and like getting like $1 after another, and really has a problem in that way. But it's the way it's filmed, the way it's shot, the rapid fire dialogue and like constant profanity and violence all over it's so intense for its entire 135 minutes. It just is relentless in the best way. And highly recommend people check that movie out.
So better or worse than Little Nicky?
As someone who considers himself to be kind of an Adam Sandler apologist, Little Nicky maybe the worst Adam Sandler.
Yeah, I think so too.
Jack and Jill begs to differ.
I would put Jack and Jill above Little Nicky, honestly, personally.
I do too.
Yeah, right.
Pacino showed up and it was a better movie.
That's all you got to do. Yeah, just put Pacino in there. It doesn't matter what the rest of the movie is. You've got a better movie than Little Nicky, bro. But folks, Uncut Gems. Yeah, try as difficult as it may be. Try not to hold Jack and Jill against him when watching Uncut Gems, because boy, it's really a fantastic work.
And in case you missed it, we did a Sandler movie last week. Despite some sound mishaps, Happy Gilmore is out there and available for download as well. So that's fun.
Oh, cool. And yeah, looking forward to hearing that one.
So that was an appropriate, in keeping with the theme. Today's movie is a silent movie. What's the funniest thing you've heard in a movie theater?
I'm just this may be a totally random answer, but it is the first thing that pops into my head. When I was 11 years old and saw the movie The Fifth Element, and Bruce Willis is like being asked from some like a robot, like an off-screen voice that says, "Are you classified as human?" And he just deadpan responds, "Negative. I am a meat popsicle." As an 11-year-old kid, I thought that was the funniest thing I had ever heard in my life. I missed the next 10 minutes of the movie because I could not stop laughing at that. I thought, not necessarily a comedy movie or a comedy moment, but that just still to this day stays with me. How much I just could not stop laughing in that moment.
Oh, there are definitely some funny moments in Fifth Element. I mean, if nothing else, was it Chris Tucker who was...
Chris Tucker. That's the first place I ever saw him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's like, "Oh my God, how to go up and down."
And how annoying he would be to Corbett. Like Corbett just like is not having Chris Tucker's shtick. It's just, oh boy, it's great. And also, I mean, multi-pass has become quite a classic line as well. And I remember kind of chuckling at that too. So yeah, there's plenty of comedy in The Fifth Element as far as science fiction movies go.
Now, Charlie Chaplin is a key guy that we're going to be studying today. Obviously, he is a landmark in comedy. Who is your favorite comedic actor, Peter?
It's so interesting. I mean, just going through retro reviews, just feeling like how the idea of the comedic actor seems to be kind of going away. I feel like all the comedic actors from my childhood, like Jim Carrey and even Will Ferrell nowadays and Steve Carell, like they were comedic actors 10 years ago, but now they're kind of seen more as serious actors. I mean, Jim Carrey, but still, even to this day, Jim Carrey is, he did just do Sonic. I haven't seen that, but I can't imagine that's a particularly dramatic role for him. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and go a different way and say Jack Lemmon is a guy who had, like, from before I was even a kid discovering Jim Carrey, he is a guy who has always made me laugh so hard, always made me cry, just kind of like, it really runs the gambit all around. And I mean, he does consider Charlie Chaplin to be a major inspiration. That just hit me as well. I didn't necessarily intend to do a contemporary of Charlie Chaplin with that answer, but Jack Lemmon in movies like The Odd Couple and The Great Race and Some Like It Hot and The Apartment, he makes me laugh so hard to this day, and just like always has it when he's on the screen. I have a smile on my face, so I'm just gonna go and give that answer there.
He's also my favorite actor with a food in his name.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
How long is that list?
So far, one.
Okay.
All right.
Fair enough. That's better than Eric.
Chad, I'm going to throw that one to you. Who's your favorite comedic actor?
John Cleese. Gotta
Oh.
go with a Monty Python representative.
That's a great one. And we covered a John Cleese movie with Rat Race, polarizing movie for the Retro Movie Roundtable crew.
Only for Brian.
Who liked it? Who didn't?
Chad and I loved it, and our other co-host, who's not on with us today, Brian, hated it.
Really? Oh, well, I love that. We've done that episode for retro reviews, or that movie for retro reviews as well. And yeah, I liked it more than Ray, but I think he seemed like he kind of liked it. Yeah.
I was gonna say you tend to be the more forgiving of the two, and I remember Ray was kind of cool on it. So yeah.
Yeah, he was kind of middle of the road, or being polite, I guess. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Rat Race. I think it holds up splendid.
Our co-hosts are wrong, and they're not here to defend themselves.
That's right.
Yes.
Wow.
3 out of 3 guests here approve.
Rat Race is great. That's you got our opinions, and that's all you need right here. So, but John Cleese, fantastic answer. That's you know what? I have John Cleese's autograph, and I will treasure that forever. I'm a huge fan of his as well.
Man, you just got to go buy his fake teeth from Rat Race now to complete the collection.
Oh, those are just priceless. That what a luck for him, man.
Now, you stop at 1980, Peter, but we go back as far as, I guess, the dawn of time. So, Chad, what movie are we going to do today, man?
From the dawn of time, also known as 1928, The Circus.
All right, so the 1928, this is a Charlie Chaplin film. The Circus was the 7th highest grossing silent movie in cinema history. It takes in more than $3.8 million in 1928. And that is a lot of money for 1928. I can't give you box office counts on the year. I normally tell you where it places in the box office that year, but it's just too old for reliable records. All I know is The Singing Fool was number 1 in 1928. So IMDb gives The Circus an 8.2. The critics from Rotten Tomatoes give it a 96%, and the audience score is a 94%. So this is held in very high regards. Chaplin was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, but the Academy took Chaplin out of the running by giving him a special award for writing, acting, directing, and producing The Circus. I don't know why they did that, just to kind of stick it to him. The Academy no longer lists Chaplin's nominations on their official list of nominees either, although an unofficial list does include him for Outstanding Picture, Best Director, Best Comedy Picture, which I wish they still had, Best Actor, Best Writer, and Best Writing for Original Story. So it's my understanding Chaplin was not a fan of the Academy and kind of stuck it to the Academy, and they didn't like him back, and this might be why. I don't know beyond that. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that one, Peter.
I mean, he did have, it's a lot. Even going back to then, it feels like the Academy never really took comedy seriously. And around the same time, like, they never took animation seriously. So, like, Walt Disney was just getting these special awards, and Charlie Chaplin just gets these special awards, but doesn't get the actual competitive awards. And I know in 1940, he did The Great Dictator. That was nominated for Best Picture. He was nominated for Best Actor. And he did not, like, that was the one time, like, that could have been finally Charlie Chaplin's moment at the Oscars, and it didn't happen. And so I think, like, just forever, he was just not a fan of it. And that is so weird that he was nominated in those 4 categories, and they just instead just gave him a special Oscar. That's just such a weird thing to do. And I just discovered that in doing research for this episode. I knew he won the special Oscar, but I didn't know that was because they scrapped the regular nominations for the movie. That's very odd.
It is very odd. It's almost like going back to, like, Titanic with James Cameron and being like, here, James Cameron, have one for an attaboy. And okay, now for everybody else.
That would have been nice. I mean, yeah, maybe that was the situation. They just didn't want him to sweep all the categories, so they're just like, yeah, instead here's a special Oscar where you don't actually beat anybody. You just have this Oscar for this prestigious icon right here. I don't know, that the logic there just doesn't make sense to me. But yes, I do love that they did split comedy and drama back then. That's pretty nice.
I think that I'm imagining his trophy to be like a ghetto trophy, like with like some tape on it too, like and like a marker like written on it crudely, like for like special Oscar for Charlie.
It's a retrofitted bowling trophy or something like that.
Yes, exactly.
Poor Charlie Chaplin. He did eventually win a Lifetime Achievement Award, though, and he showed up for that. And that's, I don't know, if you look on YouTube, that's a pretty amazing moment right there, where Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau actually presents him with it. So that's yet another connection there. So he wasn't all bad with the Academy, but yeah, clearly not the best relationship for a while. So.
I think they should have had a mime present it.
That would have been interesting. Yeah. Well, any big enough names in the mime community to show up at the Oscars might have been a struggle to get. But yeah, there's an idea there.
Now, Peter, had you seen The Circus before?
I had seen it before, but it's probably the Chaplin movie that I'd seen the least number of times. I am a Chaplin fan. I'm a big fan of his work. I've seen his other movies that came out around this time, like The Gold Rush and City Lights and Modern Times and The Great Dictator. Those are kind of the big ones. I'd say at least 10 times each. This one I'd seen once or twice beforehand. So this was relatively fresh as far as Chaplin goes for me.
Is it holding up well for you as you watch it over and over, and what's it like coming back to it now?
That's the weird thing about The Circus. When I first discovered Chaplin, it was on Hulu. This is back when the Hulu had the Criterion Collection. I just decided one day, hey, it's time for me to discover Charlie Chaplin, to finally watch these movies. And I just looked for the names that I recognize, like The Gold Rush. I feel like that's a very famous movie. City Lights is a very famous movie. Modern Times is a very famous movie. Then I spotted The Circus, and I assumed it was just like one of his like more minor like shorts or something that maybe came before he got big. But no, it came right in between The Gold Rush and City Lights. This was in his heyday, but I had never heard of it. It's something that for some reason seems to get kind of buried in his filmography in a weird way, despite being a super big hit, one of the highest grossing movies of its year, and winning Chaplin one of his only Oscars. So I don't know what it is about The Circus that makes it so hidden, but even for me, it's something that I didn't come back to that often, even though like watching, I was like, oh, this is a legit Chaplin feature. This fits right in with some of his most famous work. And it still really made me laugh. I was laughing out loud at times that, at moments that I had forgotten, because it's been a few years since I last watched it. And just looking at the artistry and the physical capability the guy has, the sense of grace that he has with every one of his movements it's so compelling still to this day, literally almost 100 years later. This movie is 92 years old. So, I feel like it holds up just as well. I wouldn't call it his best movie, but it is a worthy entry into this incredibly legendary filmography this guy has.
Wow, you are very versed in Charlie Chaplin. So, Chad, are you as familiar with Charlie?
No, I've seen snippets of various Tramp films, but this was my first full feature.
Interesting. Okay.
So what did you think?
I really enjoyed it. I had a good time. I would recommend it to anyone.
Do you feel like his comedic sense as a silent movie maker, how does that feel watching it today, Chad?
I mean, it's still familiar to me. I grew up on Looney Tunes, and a lot of what he does I saw replicated by Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck. It's all very familiar to me. It's not exactly, Ray-sided. Or Peter. Wow, I'm going to do the opposite of Russell. Cited like Will Ferrell or Jim Carrey. I don't think it's on that styling, but it feels very Looney Tunes, Warner Brothers-esque.
Interesting. For me, this is my first Charlie Chaplin film as well, short of maybe minor scenes that you've seen here and there. And I was really surprised at the depth of the movie. And I was expecting more of a Marx Brothers slapstick kind of thing, because I'm very versed with them. But I found something quite different as we got into it. There was a lot of sentimentality to it. And studying Chaplin a little more while learning about this movie, it was quite a trademark for Charlie, and it was a big part of the reason that he was able to build the comedy genre up. So I think that this is an interesting still frame in time. I would say, as a viewer, it's almost like I'm watching another kind of movie, and I guess the fact that it is a silent movie is. But I mean, Mary, my wife, put it well when she said, "I feel like I watch like an art film or something like that, where this doesn't necessarily feel like a movie as we think of it as today." So I would say my experience with it was somewhat surreal. This is only my fourth silent movie.
Love it. I love that you both were kind of that this was your first full Chaplin experience. I'm glad that you were able to experience it for the first time. Cool.
So there will be spoilers that lie ahead. So if you haven't seen The Circus, first of all, it's free on YouTube, so check it out and then enjoy the rest of this episode. We will be back after these messages.
President Donald J. Trump here from the White House. You know, America, we don't win anymore. Our podcasts are going overseas to India. They're leaving across the border to Mexico. They're going to China. It's very sad to see, really. America, I win at everything I do. And if you want to win too, you got to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, and get the Retro Movie Roundtable, an amazing, luxurious 5-star review, and comment. Tell them how to make the show better, and they too will win like I do. That's not all we're going to win by going to like the show on Facebook, and Facebook is going to pay for it, believe me. Also, email the show at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Do this and we will bring great podcasts back to America, like my favorite podcast, the Retro Movie Roundtable. Soon you will see we are winning again, and you are going to win so much you're going to get tired of winning. We're going to win more than Charlie Sheen. Believe me, I know Charlie. He's a very reasonable man and a very good friend of mine.
This message was endorsed by President Donald Trump.
All right, we're back, and this is your final warning. There will be spoilers that lie ahead. So, Chad, for those who haven't seen The Circus since 1928, do you want to refresh people's memory?
I will refresh all those, 120-year-olds that are listening to our podcast?
Big demographic for the show.
Huge.
You got
yes.
the coveted 100 to 120-year-old demographic. I'm glad you guys got that.
We are cornering that market.
That's right, and this episode is brought to you by Prunes.
So, a hungry tramp, played by Charlie Chaplin, is mistaken for a pickpocket at a small circus show. He's chased down by police and the real crook until he's inadvertently stumbles into the middle of the show. The crowd loves him and he's a hit, so the ringmaster gives him a tryout. The tramp is terrible, but the other property men quit after not being paid. Go figure. So he's forced to hire the tramp anyway. The tramp becomes a hit at the show due to his ineptitude, which is a personal dream of mine. Get rich by being bad at stuff. He befriends the circus's horse rider, Merna, who happens to be the ringmaster's stepdaughter, and she's told by a fortune teller that she will fall in love and marry a dark, handsome man who is near her now. Of course, with fortune tellers being super reliable, Merna immediately concludes that she's in love with Rex, the newly hired tightrope walker, much to the tramp's dismay. The tramp gets depressed, does a bad job, and is given one more chance after a series of poor performances. When Rex can't be found for a show, the ringmaster sends the tramp out, and despite nearly falling to his death, the tramp succeeds with the stunt and the crowd is entertained. Unfortunately, he then catches the ringmaster slapping Merna and proceeds to beat him up, which earns him a firing. Merna runs away to join the tramp, but the tramp finds Rex and convinces him to marry Merna. The trio return to the circus where a promise is made to treat Merna better since she's now Rex's wife, which is kind of weird. The circus leaves, but the tramp remains behind. Sad music plays as he picks himself up and jaunts away.
Well done, well done. It is a short movie. This movie is only an hour and 10 minutes long, give or take. Is that about right?
Yeah, 70 minutes is what it's listed.
Which even for Chaplin, that's pretty brief. A lot of his movies at least hit 80 or so. So this is pretty short.
Yeah. Now this is a circus that I'm not sure that it doesn't make circus life look glamorous anyway. You're getting beaten on a regular basis and you're starved when you don't perform up to speed. This is not a glamorous version of the circus, is it, Peter?
Certainly not. And I imagine that's a pretty accurate depiction as well. I mean, especially back then when certainly like animal rights and things like that. That wasn't very well known or prominent or anything. Like people just kind of let a lot of crazy stuff happen to not just animals, but humans and performers and stuff. I mean, I don't, I wasn't there or anything, but I can imagine this isn't I can't imagine this is a very unfair way of portraying the circus.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, unions weren't a big thing in 1928.
Right, exactly.
This is my third circus movie from around this time period, though, because we've got The Man Who Laughs, Freaks, and The Circus, and they all are pretty down on what circus life would have been. So it seems at least a trope of the time, and probably accurate, that it was underpaid, miserable.
Yeah, that is interesting that it was also such a huge trope in filmmaking at the time. I get like the circus. It's kind of hard to picture that today. The circus was like such a huge thing that everybody went to see. Like nowadays, circuses barely exist anymore, it seems like. And if they do, it's in a much different capacity. And we're just talking like the last few years when everything really got retrofitted, when people became more concerned with animals and things like that. So it's definitely a product of its time. And it's so weird like to watch it, even though I frequently forget that it's from 1928. I feel like it's a period piece made about a time long past. But no, this is a contemporary movie for its time. This was how things were back then. So. Yeah,
it's interesting that the circus isn't treated with more enthusiasm, because I mean, my grandfather would tell me that, growing up in northeastern Pennsylvania and stuff like that, when the circus came to town, like they actually came from the train, and that you could see the animals paraded through the streets. Not necessarily, obviously, animal rights people probably would say that a lot of this wasn't great, but the fact of the matter is it enthralled people. Like, you didn't have a zoo in every town. They were marching elephants down through the street. And again, there's no TV. It's quite an event to see these colorful faces and the music playing. And so it's one of those things where, as you mentioned, Peter, today's time, it's hard to fully appreciate the enthusiasm of the circus, but it's really interesting that they chose not to show the joy of the circus. It is the rougher behind the scenes part of it. And you're right, Chad, those other movies also depicted it that way. Again, going through my grandfather's perception of the circus, it sure seems like for everybody else, it was such a happy thing. So it's an interesting other side of the coin on this one. Dumbo's kind of the same way too.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. That is interesting. Since 1928, film was a very young medium. So you almost have to wonder if this is filmmakers saying like, hey, stop going to the circus, come to the movies, like that, like them trying to take the audiences away from the circus. Like that's why they're depicting it in such a negative light, which is very clever. And 100 years later, it looks like their efforts have finally been more or less successful.
Yeah. And abusing your daughter, like, was just like a part of it, like from right off the bat. Like he slapped his daughter, and it's just like, whoa, okay, we're doing that then.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But it's okay. They shook hands at the end, so it's all good.
Yeah, you're married now. I'll stop abusing you.
Yeah.
So weird. God, yeah, exactly.
Now that you've got a husband, the husband and stepdad are just gonna shake hands and be cool with each other.
That's what you're supposed to do in life. Now that you've done that, okay, we're okay with you now. You got married. You fulfilled your duties.
Sorry for that. Those 2 decades of physical abuse and starving you.
Right. He denies her food, which just like blew my mind. I mean, that's a pretty common trope in the Charlie Chaplin movies is hunger. Like he's hungry, the girl in it is hungry, and they find ways to help each other. But it's rare to see a girl's father actually deny her food. Like that's why she's hungry. That's brutal. Like even for this genre here. It is.
And I was surprised to see there wasn't that harsh side treated towards the animals. Again, my head goes to Dumbo on this one, but it is one of those things where they didn't exactly put up on the screen. No animals were harmed in the filming of this. It's like it's assumed. Oh, we heard them.
Yeah, just the way, just like a circus, I guess. So, I mean, back then, nobody had any rights at all. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I wonder when that started, the no animals were harmed thing.
I feel like it was the 90s, but don't quote me on that. Like, I remember I think Free Willy was one of those like ones that just kind of made me think like they were out there to like have this social message of like, hey, whales in captivity, and they were that was a big part of the message. So first time I took note of it was probably in the early 90s.
You're probably that's probably right around the time. Okay, so long after the Circus, I guess.
1939. Quote Russell on that.
Oh, you got the answer there?
Yeah, apparently the line was drawn when a blindfolded horse was ridden off a cliff to its death. Caused the American Humane Association, who are the trademark holders of No Animals Were Harmed, to start putting that in films.
Huh. Oh. Well, still way after this movie, so yeah.
I only missed it by about 60 years.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that lion was absolutely drugged out of its mind to not eat Charlie Chaplin.
Right. How did they do that? That is, I mean, yeah, there are shots where the lion isn't in the shot, but there are also, I mean, there's no CGI here. There's no even real trick photography that exists yet. So he is in that cage with that lion. That must be, yeah. So you think it's probably drugs that made that happen?
Drugs and really well fed. But
I was going to say, it did get up and walk around in the later scenes. I read that Chaplin himself was just flat out nervous, and he's we'll get into this a little bit later, but he's had to do several takes on that one.
I mean, that's what he did. I mean, he was such a he would do like tens to hundreds of takes for every scene ever. So to put himself in that kind of dangerous situation and still be the artist that he is and like make sure it's absolutely perfect is that's real dedication there. So.
Nope, one take with the lion. That's all you get.
Well, never. Oh, okay. I thought you did research, but
oh no.
No, that's just Chad saying if he had to get in the cage with a lion.
Yep. Yeah, that's a one shot. I don't care what happens to the film.
You would have blown my mind if you had said, actually, no, Charlie Chaplin only did one take right now. But,
oh, yeah. No.
But yeah, it's like if you get that on film once, yeah, I'm out. I would probably give that same answer, Chad.
Sometimes when I watch movies from back in the 50s or 40s, I sometimes think people fall in love awfully fast. Then I went back and saw this movie from 1928, and people fall in love even faster.
Yeah, it's a very dream scenario. Very, boy, I hate this term, but I think it applies pretty well as the manic pixie dream girl sort of thing, where like a guy who's down on his luck and a girl just happens to really like him for no explicable reason. So, and there's a lot of that in Charlie Chaplin movies. It's like not to spoil other Chaplin movies for you guys, but that is kind of what happens in pretty much all of his features. Like he's down on his luck and really pretty girl who he falls in love with, it just for some reason really likes him, and that's became a term long after that, but it clearly existed all the way back in the 1920s as well.
So if you go farther back in time, do people fall in love even faster? Like if you go back to like Roman times, like it's like, there's a chariot on the horizon. I think there's a lady in it. I'm in love.
Oh, I sure hope so. I'd root for that. Why not?
I wonder if somebody from back then got in a transport and came up to today's time and then we just watched Sleepless in Seattle, and they were like, man, it takes a long time for these people to fall in love.
It really didn't. It felt like eternity for me because the movie would not end.
Oh, boo, I liked it.
That's funny. I just rewatched that movie for the first time in about 10 years a couple weeks ago as well. I love that you just did that.
But why?
Yeah, it's the same situation. Yeah, they finally see each other at the very end. Oh yeah, we're in love and we're gonna get married. Yeah, so it's movies are escapism, and they certainly were escapism back in the 1920s, where all you had were movies and the circus and books, and that's it. So yeah, you kind of wanted to believe that love was right around the corner in every situation. So.
Now, Chad, why don't you give us a cast rundown, because there's going to be so many familiar names that everybody's going to want to know all the familiar names in this movie.
Absolutely. Especially if you haven't seen any other Charlie Chaplin films, you're going to have a bad time. Charlie Chaplin plays the Tramp.
Oh, he plays the Tramp in this one? Oh, sorry.
Stunning. He branches out later, but yeah, that's pretty much his character for the first 5-ish films. Ernest Garcia, who is our ringmaster and circus proprietor.
And part-time abuser.
Yeah.
Part-time. All right.
That may have been more than a part-time. Merna Kennedy. She is the proprietor's stepdaughter and also the circus rider. She's the love interest as well. Then we've got Harry Crocker, who is the tightrope walker Rex.
Heartthrob for the time.
Yeah, he was the tramp's rival. He's also a disgruntled property man and a clown, so he's doing triple duty here. And then we have Henry Bergman. I looked it up, no relation to Ingrid that I could find, but he plays an old clown. This is how he was credited. That's what I've got. And then Steve Murphy, who is the pickpocket who starts this whole thing with the tramp.
I also like the animated Tiny Stafford who did the head property man, the guy who was running the property manager.
Yeah. His credit was just property head. Yeah. Old clown, property head. What do you do with these?
This is like all of the actors. Like Chad's not like stopping like a third of the way down because there aren't any important people. It's just, this is it.
These people and the lion and the monkeys. That's about it. Oh, and the cat.
So, going into the cast here, obviously. Now, it's my understanding Chaplin uses some familiar faces from movie to movie. Peter, is there any overlap that you can tell us, having seen a number of Chaplin films?
The interesting thing is the female love interests that he chooses, they all seem to look exactly. If you told me that it was the same actress in all of his movies, I would believe you. I would just have to, once I looked it up, I'd be like, oh no, that's wrong. But if you were just to tell me that, they look so similar from movie to movie. So he clearly has a type.
So he's like Hitchcock before Hitchcock, where different type than Hitchcock, obviously, but Hitchcock keeps going back and getting a certain type of lady.
Yeah, always the blondes with Hitchcock, always the short-haired brunettes with Chaplin, pretty much. So.
They all look like his second wife. It's really creepy.
Chaplin or Hitchcock?
Chaplin.
Chaplin. Yeah, he definitely had a type.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. This lady only worked. Merna Kennedy only worked with her only worked with him in this one movie. Not sure what the reason was. Usually he would work with them at least twice. But you see the other folks, Ernest Garcia has, of course, worked with him. Well, I say, of course, as everyone knows this, but he was in Modern Times and City Lights, the two movies that came right after this. And Harry Crocker was in he worked with him again in Limelight, a much later talkie.
That's his last one, right?
Yeah, Chaplin's?
Yeah.
He did.
No.
He did a couple more after that.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, he was, let's say it's his last good one.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of what came after it. But so, yeah, that's about it for him. And then there's one other, Henry Bergman. He's a very familiar face in Chaplin movies. He was in, Modern Times, City Lights, and The Gold Rush. So, and a lot of his shorts beforehand. So they were clearly good working compadres there. So.
Right, yeah. Tiny Sandford and John Rand are also mainstays. Crocker was fired, though. He was Chaplin's assistant who did cameos with Ed, a disagreement on, I think it was actually City Lights, and he was fired. And they wound up reconciling, so that's why he goes away for a little while. But Merna Kennedy got married and just retired.
Yeah, she got. I imagine once his leading lady gets married, he has no more use for them. But something about watching Chaplin movies, it almost doesn't matter who the other actors are, because if you read about what his directing style was, he basically plays all of those parts. He acts out those parts for those people and tells them, do it exactly the way I just showed you to do it. And that's it. If you do it any differently, I will be mad and you're going to have to do it again. It's like,
again.
Even if you do it well, you're still going to have to do it 50 to 100 more times. So it's you can call it what you will, but he's definitely an auteur in that way. He wants everything to be exactly the way which is probably why he kept working with the same people over and over. Like once he could trust that they wouldn't have a problem with it, that they would do what he says, then he'll keep using them. So
he is very loyal to his actors because it's a common story. A number of the actors and actresses that he worked with, he continued to pay them a kind of a salary or like a ongoing fee for on the rest of the duration of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
As an architect, I wish I could get that for each building. That would be good. So, hey, is the building still going? Is it still up? Okay, great. I'll just take a little bit of a royalty off of that.
Good deal, right? Yeah, I think, I mean, he was like one of the most powerful people in Hollywood. So I guess like not only could he afford it, but he was happy to just keep that crew going and keep people who he could trust. So like if it meant that he didn't lose them, if they didn't go to another like director and stop working with Chaplin, I guess that was worth it for him. That's just me speculating, but that it sounds about right considering how much control he liked to have over every aspect of his productions. So.
Now, Chad, what do you make of the Tramp character? This is your introduction to him, but what do you think about him?
He was great. You have to be animated in a silent film. You have to exaggerate, but as soon as you see that walk up, you know it's Charlie Chaplin. We get that view from the back, but he just has such a distinct set of mannerisms that you're just instantly drawn in, and everything he does is exaggerated. It's big. I love the Tramp.
Now, Peter, as you mentioned, the Tramp is pretty consistent with, even though he goes into different settings. I think one of the things that maybe the Circus gets buried a little bit is, as I'm understanding it, the Tramp, whether it be something like The Kid or Modern Times, the Tramp's environment is in the city, usually in a poverty-stricken kind of setting, as I'm kind of understanding it, where there's a struggle involved. Whereas the Circus or Gold Rush pull him out of that environment and put him elsewhere.
Certainly, yeah. It becomes a fish out of water in a way. This is probably the least out of his elements that he becomes. Actually, no, he's a show business. I guess that's kind of a big deal there, getting to be the circus. But yeah, that they do kind of all follow the same basic outline. I don't want to accuse him of just being repetitive or anything, because I mean it's a formula that works really well. But yeah, always involving a girl who he falls instantly in love with, and he's a guy like struggling down on his luck, but then like throws everything he has into impressing this girl and ends up in a much more fortunate position than what he's used to. And it is kind of like it is kind of like the dream scenario for a lot of people. And that's probably why he was so successful. A lot of people were saying, well, yeah, if this guy can become successful, can become like the star of a circus, or can pal around with rich millionaires and city lights, or can suddenly go from being like locked in a cabin in the middle of nowhere to being able to find the love of his life in the gold rush. It's probably something a lot of people really like gravitated towards. And he plays him in a really sympathetic way that you root for him. You want him to succeed, and you want him to become famous and rich, and you want him to find love in a way too. It's even though he's not a perfect guy, he has no problem with potentially stealing things that don't belong to him, and like literally eating food that a baby has in its hand. That's a fantastic opening, early scene there. And even adding jam or whatever, or it was a hot dog or something. I still can't quite figure out what that food item is that the baby has, but whatever it is, the Tramp's enjoying it. So, and I certainly don't have a problem with him doing that. I forgive him his trespasses, if you will. So.
It's funny, Mary, this was her introduction to the character as well, and she's like, he's eating that baby's food? I said, I think he's homeless and doesn't have a job. She goes, but he's eating a baby's food. I'm like, let's just see where this goes. And but he had to work his way back into Mary's good grace.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, it's a baby. I guess that's a different scenario than us. But did it work? Did he get back into her good grace?
Yes. She found him more endearing once he got that's not pickpocketed, when someone sticks money in your wallet and then you end up running from the police in a funny rundown. So it wasn't long before things bounced back for her.
So reverse pickpocket.
Picketing? I don't know.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Now, as a director and a filmmaker, Chad, what are you thinking about Chaplin? Again, it's your first exposure to him, but what do you think about him as a director?
I mean, my goodness, the amount of control, we've already covered it a little bit, but I think control freak may be an understatement here. From the fact that he's doing everything, getting all of his friends, kind of like Adam Sandler, but producing it, starring in it, composing for it later on. I don't know how he had time to crank these things out.
So Ernest Garcia is the Rob Schneider of his day.
I'm sure he's honored to be known as that.
Yeah, Chaplin was quite reclusive, and I was watching a documentary on him, and it was one of those things where he would work in a hard, like, dining room type wooden chair at a desk in a dark room with a clear story window overhead level that you couldn't see outside, and he was sitting there trying to remove distraction from himself so that he could focus and perfect these things in his mind and write them down. And so that control that you're talking about starts at this almost obsessive way. And he leads a life of sad relationships. He moves on from wife to wife. But it's a pretty common thing of, when you're Charlie's kids, he's not a very nice dad either. He had plenty of them, but he's not a nice dad or husband. Work always came first for Charlie. He made comedy a very hard-working job. He was borderline obsessed, but certainly dedicated, to say the least.
Yeah, he actually talks about hiding from his wife to make this movie. Their relationship had deteriorated so much at that point.
Yeah.
So he doesn't even mention this movie in his autobiography because of all the issues that were going on at the time.
Oh, yeah, I was pretty surprised to see making a comedy is a hard thing to do in the face of personal tragedy. And during this, his second wife, Lita Gray, she's divorcing him, and so she writes a 42-page publication, and it's dragging his sex life into the media with sensational claims about his affairs that he was having, which he was having. But,
yeah.
And then, unfortunately for Charlie, after that hit, the IRS comes back and says you owe $1 million in back taxes. So he's also the Nicolas Cage of his day.
No, I was going with Wesley Snipes.
Okay, well, I was going to say, I don't know if like Nicolas Cage, he got out of it by being in literally every movie for 2 to 3 years straight. So you can see Charlie Chaplin in Bangkok Dangerous.
Oh my God.
But it gets worse, though. I mean, he spends a good deal of time in London to try and get away from the bad press that's coming his way. I mean, she wrote some nasty, scathing things, which I think he said some nasty, scathing things to her. At one point, he tells her that she was selfish to not have an abortion for their second child when he was trying to focus on making the circus. And man, it doesn't paint a very nice picture of Charlie. And his nice guy or funny guy persona is being broken down. And in addition to all that, his studio burns down, which he had, again, he had a lot of control. He had earned this right as a director and a filmmaker. He had his own studio production facility. He was the creator, the writer. He had the whole control. Chaplin seemed to have the golden ticket. It seemed like his whole life was crumbling around him at this time.
He had to complete the sad country song going on here. His mom also passed away.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. And she suffered from mental issues as well, and which made it worse for Charlie because he had this fear because his grandmother and his mother both had mental issues, which was very poorly understood at the time. And he said, I don't know that I'm going to live a full life without, my mind's going to be lost. And so that was a storm cloud over his head the whole time. So he went gray during all of this. And it was a hard time for him, so much so that he didn't even write about the circus in his biography or his autobiography that he did. So, I mean, to your point, Peter, maybe you don't hear about it that much because this isn't a time of life that Charlie likes to think about.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, Chaplin's personal life is something that I have kind of had to divorce myself from when becoming when I became such a fan of his, and then I, as I will for anyone who I become a big fan of, when I start looking at his personal life, it's like, okay, this guy may not have been he isn't the sympathetic character in life that he is in the movies. Let's say he does have some pretty major skeletons in his closet. I could also say, well, it was a different time. I don't know if that excuses it, but it was a different time. I can at least say that. I don't think
it went down that well even at that time, though. I mean,
it didn't. It really didn't.
I mean, even at a young, he was a 19-year-old guy. He was set. He had his heart set on a 15-year-old girl, and that never really God out of him. He married a very young woman, much younger than him. That didn't turns out, he's this brilliant genius and dedicated to his work, and she's a teenager and it didn't work out. Go figure. Well, then he does it again with this Lita Gray character. She was a child actor in his movie. She plays an angel in The Kid, which is one of his earliest movies, and she again acts in another one of his movies, but she gets pregnant because that's what he's doing with all these young actresses, and they get that's his second shotgun wedding, because his first one she got pregnant as well, and the child didn't make it, and it was a bad marriage. And this one, they had 2 children, they lived. As I mentioned, he wasn't a really nice dad, but was not a very nice dad. And so it's a bad time. But I mean, he replaces his wife, Lita Gray, with another woman named Georgia Hale. He went from sleeping with Lita Gray to then sleeping with Georgia Hale. So he not only replaced her in the movie that she was in when she got pregnant, but also replaced her in the bedroom. So.
It clearly was frowned upon. He was 35 when he married 16-year-old Lita Gray. They had to go to Mexico to get that done. So, yeah.
Chaplin was a sleazebag. You will not hear any argument from me on that. He was.
There's another topper on that, when his final wife, who actually, in fairness, they were married for 35 years, and he finally kind of got it right. Although he's still a pretty lousy dad. At age 54, he marries Una O'Neill shortly thereafter her 18th birthday. So,
oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least he waited until 18 this time, at least.
Yeah. So he doesn't stop.
Oh boy, it's clearly this is all fresh in your guys' mind. Like I said, I read about all this about 5 years ago. That just kind of divorced myself from it, because it's rough stuff to have to know about. Such a favorite artist of mine, but
oh, I'm sorry.
No. I appreciate your refreshing my memory on all this.
No, Peter's right. It's kind of like a continued train wreck, because I kept reading. I went and researched him, and you start with, oh no, and then it just keeps going, and there are more oh no's, and by then it's like, oh my goodness. Oh no.
Honestly, once talkies come in, his career doesn't have obviously he's a silent movie guy, and he helped create the art of pantomiming. He continues to make silent movies even after that to some degree, but he has a rough transition. He doesn't really thrive in the talking color movie format, and his life doesn't go very well, because he made some comments supporting the Russians during the war, and kind of having a socialist. I don't know. He didn't identify himself as a communist, but he definitely was a supporter of socialist ideals. That didn't play well either in subsequent years, through the mid-century years. And he even got banned one of his trips to England. He was banned and couldn't even come back to America. So you're right. It's just one fiasco and scandal after another. And so after he's done kind of being this international superstar of the silent screen, he's firmly financially secure. I mean, he's rich, so don't feel too bad for him, but he's a man of scandal.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. Yeah. And he had a good 35-year run in Hollywood, where he basically did whatever he wanted and was praised to high heaven. So yeah, and he's financially secure forever. So he did fine. And then, like I said, the honorary Oscar that he got, I think in the 70s or so, where he was able to come back to America for that. That was kind of like a nice final farewell for the guy. And but yes, he was basically as bad as Hollywood would get at the time, in a way. So obviously, character-wise, he isn't the best. And something that a lot of people will cite, Buster Keaton was kind of the other big silent comedy star at the time. And Buster Keaton, a lot of his movies they have similar stories as well. It's a guy who's down on his luck, who's frequently trying to impress a girl. But Buster Keaton actually did struggle. He actually did have troubles. He wasn't on top of the world the whole time. So you can kind of feel more of a sincerity in those films, whereas Chaplin is you kind of know while watching especially his later films, that he is just a guy who's on top of the world. It's kind of hard to see him as the little tramp in a way, unless you can, you got to suspend that disbelief.
But he is a rags to riches story, so that's part of the inspiring part of him. He grew up very poor. His dad died. His mother had mental trouble, and he and his brother kind of like these street kids. They were sitting there performing themselves, trying to cobble together money. They're poor. They're dwelling in these English streets, and so the tramp is very much taken from his upbringing and the poor conditions that he grew up in. And so that's that insecurity and he was a deeply insecure man. That's that thing that he had, that chip on his shoulder that never really went away. And that's where the tramp came out of. And that's probably where those socialist tendencies came out of, and his resentment towards capitalism, which is super ironic because you're totally enjoying all of the best parts of capitalism are right there for him. So, but it's that upbringing for him that I think that he created the tramp.
It's a very conflicted, it's a very conflicting feelings there, and a very conflicted persona that he has. But you're right. He is 100% rags to riches. He just like climbed up on stage one time just out of nowhere when his mother was supposed to perform. I'm sorry, I'm not entirely fresh on the story, but it's depicted in the movie Chaplin starring Robert Downey Jr. But that's how he basically first got going, and really did come from like total poverty, workhouse, nothing, and became arguably the most famous person in the world for quite a long time.
So all of this stuff that's happening during the circus, which is like the beginning of the downfall for Chaplin in many ways. Filming took 11 months, and I think movies were made faster back then. So that is bad, and he had a nervous breakdown. He had to shut it down for a while. So this is a long time after there's a long time between this and his next movie as well. So
yeah, but the next movie, City Lights, I think he spent 2 years working on that one. So it's like he kept the pattern going, I guess, for the long shooting periods, because he still clearly did have a lot of creative freedom even from this point going, even though he was his personal setbacks and everything, but he still had several more hits after this. So.
Certainly. And there's a clip from the 1928 premiere of this movie, which can be found on bonus DVDs of people out there who have it, that it's funny. There was this definitive evidence of time travel in a scene. There's a woman walking past a zebra, and she appears to be talking on a cell phone. And this was kind of a fun debate that people were talking about. It turns out, however, that this cell phone is actually a super ghetto giant brick of a 1924 Siemens hearing aid device.
I heard about, I've yet to spot that in the actual movie, but, the way I watched it this time was a brand new spiffy Criterion Blu-ray, which I had not watched yet. And the movie looks terrific, but I haven't watched any of the special features yet. I assume that's there. But did you spot it in the actual movie, this shot?
I looked for it, to be honest with you, and I did not personally see it, but it's part of the urban legend of the movie. So it's kind of like one of those, like the hanging little person in the Wizard of Oz or whatever in the background.
Right.
Is that a cell phone? And gosh, that's a fun thing to try and sneak definitive proof of time travel in there. I'd like to see something like that painted in Da Vinci's paintings or something like that.
Definitive proof of time travel. That's a leap, but yeah, it's fun. It's fun nonetheless.
Yeah, I love the Big Bang Theory when it's an early one. I think when they talk about like when Sheldon and
Leonard.
Yeah, when Sheldon and Leonard first meet, they say we agree when the room contract, and he's like, if either one of us solves time travel, we agree to come back to this moment in time. And they sit there, and like Sheldon's like, oh, I really thought I would have had that beat.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Oh boy, yeah. I love time travel. Yeah, I wish it were real.
Now, Chad, we talked about this feeling like a period piece. It feels that way because it's so incredibly accurate, because it's of its time. What does it feel like to get into this time capsule and come back to 1928?
You mentioned it earlier of the circus being a bigger event. It was interesting to see, there aren't very many animals that we saw. We see monkeys, we see a few horses and the lion in the cage, but those aren't really center stage. But people are lining up for these clowns that really aren't very entertaining. They get booed at one point, but they're still showing up. It felt like certainly an earlier time where this was a newer attraction. It was something for the whole community to do. It felt to me about 1920s Great Depression-esque era.
It's one of those things where, I to your point, I would have wanted more vibrancy. I wanted to see the joy of the circus. Like when Charlie does the tightrope scene, there's a sense of fun to it because most of the time he's a clown and he doesn't know he's a clown. He doesn't know he's the joke. To your point, I guess this was a bad circus and people weren't rooting for it, but we don't see the circus performing, clicking on high gear like when Rex comes in and stuff like that. Maybe this is just the Marx Brothers in me, because they'll take a break from being really funny to play a song and to put you in the moment of the time and stuff like that. There's part of me that just kind of wants to sit back and enjoy the circus being executed well.
Yeah, I mean, the circus was still kind of a relatively new concept. Barnum didn't get into really the circus that we know until 1880s, something like that. So maybe 30, 40 years, but they were just acquiring animals fairly recently by the time of this film, so it may not have the same pageantry that we who grew up in the 80s and 90s saw these elephants and people riding on top of them and doing tricks and everything else. It was just, here's a guy walking on a rope with monkeys.
I don't know. Before this, they had Zac Efron and Hugh Jackman singing in Center Ring.
Oh, who can forget that? Yeah. I did not know that. I did not know that animals were relatively new at the time.
The animals seemed like a big part of the attraction to me. I mean, as a kid, these were the parts that excited me the most.
Yeah, I absolutely hated the clowns. I wasn't someone that was terrified of them. I just found them really boring and not entertaining. So I'm with the audience here. It's like, yes, boo the clowns. They're not fun.
I also like the acrobats and I did like the acrobats too.
I like clowns when they're not wearing makeup. I feel like Charlie Chaplin in a lot of ways is a clown who just doesn't have the makeup on, and I feel like a lot of silent film stars are that way. Like as long as they don't have the creepy makeup, a lot of the technique that they employ can be pretty admirable, for me at least.
To that point, though, he doesn't. The man, Charles Chaplin, looks nothing like the Tramp. And he does have a fair bit of makeup on. I mean, when you see a picture of him, he doesn't have that mustache. His hair is a lot lighter and combed in a very, very different fashion. Obviously, he's not a hobo. There's a certain degree of this look that he transforms himself into through this high contrast makeup. I think it's done partially to accentuate the bigness of his eyes and to, again, go high contrast that makes him more animated, and your eyes just instantly go to him as well with this wardrobe too. But to your point, Peter, Charlie doesn't look anything like him, like the Tramp in real life. In fact, there's a really funny story where Charlie was such a hit, they had like Charlie Chaplin lookalike contests. And Charlie, the man himself, goes into this contest in San Francisco and he doesn't win. He comes in third.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, that was something interesting. Like Charlie Chaplin, biggest movie star in the world, but he could walk down the street and nobody would recognize him because he looked so different from his trademark character, which I loved. That's pretty funny as well. And yeah, I mean, by makeup, I mean just like not like super like the stereotypical clown makeup, but yeah, he does make himself up. Both to become the character and also because, silent films, you need to accentuate your features in a way that you don't necessarily have to with once sound came along. But yeah, it is pretty interesting how much he changes from the way you're used to him looking. If you just see him as a guy, like in his later films and like Limelight and King of New York, where he's not playing the Tramp anymore and he doesn't have the mustache, he's unrecognizable. You do not think that that's the same person that you knew in all these silent movies. So.
No, exactly. Chad, what do you think about the wardrobe, like the classic Charlie Chaplin look that everybody was trying to look like?
I think the jacket with the tails is just the signature part of that look. The cane's a great addition too. The bowler hat always makes me think of Odd Job.
Yes, me too.
Everything else, like the wardrobe, I didn't find particularly spectacular in a film called The Circus, but the Tramp's wardrobe, even though it's reused from every one of his films is just so iconic.
It's interesting. He has this really tiny jacket that makes his top look small and pushes his shoulders in and makes him, again, accentuates the smallness on top, but then he wears these really baggy pants. It's, again, high contrast. His face has this high contrast, and he's got these really long, pointy kind of shoes that curl up, and he walks in such a way. It is influenced from, like, this English hobo that apparently in his time when growing up, where people would wear a tie even though they were dirty and it was discarded like clothes, there was the sense of, even though you're homeless, to try and have a sense of dignity. Again, it's from that world of that poor world that he's taken this character to kind of be this underdog, every man that people connected with.
And you know what blew my mind that I didn't hear about until a couple of years after I'd really become a fan of Chaplin and the character, the walk that he has, the kind of like waddling sort of thing, like where that comes from. The reason why he does that is because the shoes he's wearing, the soles are all torn up. So it's painful on his feet to wear those shoes. They're not like smooth and comfortable. And that's what he's doing. He's limping in that way. And I just that kind of touch that makes it also like super funny and endearing is just, it's just so beautifully authentic. I love it.
My favorite use of the cane was somebody had been knocked out and was sitting in front of the circus tent, and he was trying to get up to see through a hole, and so he just pulls this guy's knocked out body over just a little bit to the side and then stands on the guy. There's something very cartoonish and Looney Tunes about that. When Chad said, I'm thinking Looney Tunes, I was like, that's the first thing that pops in my mind right away.
And without even flinching, he's just like, oh, here's a solution. He just pulls the guy over. It's fantastic. I love it.
What do you think about the early music in this, Chad?
It's like, oh, I'm not expecting spoken word as far as the initial song. Now it turns out that was put in later on, but then I see composed by Charlie Chaplin. I'm like, oh my goodness, were you just broke or apparently not trusting anyone else to do it?
Yeah, total driver mentality.
Yeah, I liked the music quite a bit. There was one particular scene where they're in this merry-go-round type chase, and I thought the music was particularly energetic, and it was just delightful and playful. It was a lot of fun.
In a silent movie, music matters perhaps even more. Peter, what did you think about the music?
Oh, it's great. I mean, same deal for me. I did not realize that the opening had been changed. Like when I first watched it on Hulu, I did not realize that the opening had been changed to include this vocal performance from 1969 era Charlie Chaplin singing that song. And I mean, I'm pretty sure, maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, this does come from the era where silent movies just existed silently, and whatever the movie theater did to add the soundtrack was whatever the movie theater did. But this version that we watch now was the version in 1969 that Chaplin actually came up with himself, like added his own music to it, including the song at the beginning. So I think it definitely lends an extra authenticity to it that you may not have gotten if you had watched it before Chaplin actually added that himself. So
yeah, you're right. They would have live orchestras to play along with the movies, but otherwise you got what you got.
Later Chaplin does get the benefit of synchronized music, but you're right, Peter. This is not that later Chaplin. This is, to Chad's point, they're playing music with it. But I'm glad in '69 they went back and added that. And it also explains something, because during the singing it was like music by Charlie Chaplin. I'm sitting there going like, that sounds like a much older, larger man. Like that voice does not line up to that person. And that kept bugging me. And then later on, I also found out what you guys found. It's like, oh, yep, it all lines up.
Yeah. This was the last one too. His next one, City Lights, was in the talkie era. So he was able to compose the music himself and add it himself. So everyone who saw that movie in theaters saw the same version of the music in the movie. So but yeah, this was the last one like this, where it was whatever you got, we got what you got. So
I really liked the inclusion of blue skies as well at the very end of the film. This is the second movie where we're going to be talking about the jazz singer, actually with the same podcast crew here.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, after talking about the silent movie, going and doing Singing in the Rain is actually a really good follow-up to this because they transition from talkies to talkies from silent movies.
That's so true, yeah.
But, Blue Skies was heavily featured and made famous in The Jazz Singer, and Chaplin redid it. And he did it in this slower, kind of morose, funeral dirge type playthrough at the very end of the film. And it was kind of a fun illusion as long as you know the history. The Jazz Singer had just come out, and he added this in 4 days after the Jazz Singer came out. And it was kind of a nod to the Jazz Singer, but also, my time might be on borrowed time at this point. What I do may be on borrowed time.
Because when he talks, he's like, I can't stand it.
I mean, it's interesting that he would feel that way, too, because, I mean, for my money, he does his best work in his next 3 movies, and I think his most enduring work in his next 3 movies. So if he thinks he's living on borrowed time, I think history has shown that, no, his best work was still ahead of him. So, yeah, it's...
True. Peter, one of the things I always get a kick out of is sometimes you guys do these shout outs, and I think it's funny. Ray has very different music taste than you. And so Ray will come in and be like, have you heard the new Harry Styles album? And, Peter's more of a U2, REM kind of. Am I getting this right? You're more like an alternative fan?
Those are my 2 favorite bands right there. You pretty much named them.
Okay. Right. And so it's always funny to hear like Ray be like, have you heard the new Selena Gomez song? And Peter's like, no, tell me more about that.
Like Selena Gomez? You mean the actress from Spring Breakers? What? I don't know.
I always get a kick out of that.
Yeah, we definitely have differing music tastes without question. He tries.
I side with you on Rat Race. I side with you on music. So there you go.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yes, thank you.
All right, guys, do you want to hand out some awards here?
Favorite time, yeah.
Let's do it.
All right, Peter, I think I know who your MVP is, but why don't you tell us?
I mean, how can you choose anyone else? It's the monkey who bites his nose. That's no. I mean, Charlie Chaplin. Come on, he's the guy. Yes, he is. Not the down on his luck, sympathetic character in life that he is in the movies, but his work here is just masterful. I don't want to end without also mentioning the mirror chase, which is just like phenomenal. My jaw dropped during the mirror chase scene in that crazy fun house, and like the coordination, the choreography, and the way that's directed. So you somehow don't see the camera. Acting, directing, story-wise, Charlie Chaplin just kills it in this movie, and it's not even anywhere near his best movie. So
yeah, there may have never been a bigger gap between MVP and second prize for MVP. Chad, who's your MVP? Same.
I can't imagine picking anything else just because how central he was to this movie. Even little things like before the mirror scene when he's imitating like a cuckoo clock worker and just an animatronic, and it was believable. It was the craziest thing. It's like he looks like one of those figures on a Swiss clock. He just nails things that seem simple but would just be you can't have some random person go in and do what he does. So yeah, Charlie Chaplin.
All right, best supporting actor, perhaps a little harder. Who is your best supporting? Peter.
Okay, yeah. So I guess Merna Kennedy as what they say, his stepdaughter / a circus rider. She's terrific. She has a real presence. You can see why the tramp would be taken by her, even though we don't get to learn that much from her. She becomes like very, very sympathetic and does a great job and is a good match for him. She elevates the movie and elevates him very well. She's terrific. Yeah.
Chad, in this extensively long cast list, who's your best supporting?
Going with the child abuser, Ernest Garcia, not for his abusing, but he was a good foil to the tramp's buffoonery. He's the straight man who's just constantly exasperated but finds himself forced to deal with the tramp, and I like that dynamic. I didn't like the beating your stepdaughter part, but everything else.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with you too. The Rob Schneider of his day, Ernest Garcia. I really enjoyed the scene where they have the foam buckets and they're painting each other's faces, and the chair is being pulled out from under him as he's trying to get him to be a clown.
Yes.
I think he really shines as part of the action in this, and I wish he had gotten involved a little more with some of the mayhem, because you're right, he's a very good straight man, and I think Chaplin and his calamity plays off well with this. There's another straight man character with the magician later, but I like Ernest Garcia as my straight man, so I'm going to go with him as well.
That move is so smooth too. He pulls the chair and the guy just falls. He does it again, and it seems like it doesn't seem forced. It seems like exactly what the characters would do in that position, and it's just gold right there.
Hidden gem, Peter.
I think the pickpocket does a great job of matching him, and the pickpocket or the policeman, I could pretty much choose either of them because of that magnificent chase scene, which you're always looking at Chaplin. Chaplin is the focus, but the pickpocket adds so much to it as well. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say him, because it sets the tone for the movie beautifully. And
so the pickpocket is played by Steve Murphy.
Yes, Steve Murphy.
And Chad, who's your hidden gem?
I'm picking a horse. There's this little horse that chases the tramp, and it happens a lot, but you know what? It never got old. So that horse is my underappreciated cast, but I'll also give a shout out to the animal trainers and handlers, because they did a remarkable job.
My hidden gem is actually going to be the baby. Early on, I got a huge kick out of that.
Yeah.
Even though Mary didn't appreciate it as much, I thought that went well. And given how many times Charlie makes you reshoot dealing with a young child, it does make me wonder, how many times did they shoot that?
Probably quite a few. He probably was like, it doesn't look like it looks like he swallows that food, so he probably had to eat a lot of whatever that was on that day, and probably had to go to the hospital like he did when he had to eat the shoe in the Gold Rush. So.
Yeah, I read about that. Now, I haven't seen Gold Rush, but I did read where he and this other supporting actor eat a shoe, and they make it do it for all day long, and they're eating licorice that looks like leather, and they both have horrendous diarrhea, because licorice is kind of a laxative, and so, they're sitting there, eating it, and then, going to the bathroom with horrible diarrhea, and then coming back out and then doing it again. Now, Chaplin's kind of doing this to himself, but I did find myself going, man, that sucks to be the supporting actor who's just all right, Joe, we're going to do this again.
Oh, yeah, poor guy. But as we established, he paid him well, so that's at least I got that.
That's true, for life. So my hidden gem's the same as yours, Peter, with Steve Murphy, the pickpocket, because, man, that he was so animated. It just great job. You got to be larger than life to stand out in the silent movie, and he does that. So now, recast. This is the part of the show where we tend to say, who would you like to replace and who would you put in their spot? This is a pretty hard task to do for back then, so we're gonna loosen up our rules on this a little bit. So if you had to cast somebody from today in a role, who would you recast and who would you put in their place?
I would love the idea of seeing Jim Carrey play a tramp character. Maybe he's a little bit older than Chaplin was at the time, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he definitely is older than Chaplin was at the time. But I would like to see Jim Carrey do a silent movie or something like this, because he is so animated. He has such a face for expressions and everything. So that would be interesting. I'd like to see that.
But Chad, if you had to recast the Tramp with somebody from today, who would you want?
That's a different question. I actually answered the 1928 equivalent.
Did you really?
Did you?
I did. I picked on Rex a little bit. I don't really have a problem with Rex, but Conrad Veidt, who plays the man who laughs.
Wow, you stayed to the rules on this one. Good for you.
I did. Conrad has that circus performer acting experience, and the man who laughs actually came out the same year. In reality, it couldn't happen, but that's my cast member pick.
You never know. You can do two movies at once.
He's actually a handsome guy. He doesn't look like the Joker in real life, but as far as replacing the Tramp, I liked the documentary of Robert Downey Jr. I thought he did a very good job.
Oh, so you've seen that movie?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I'm going to kind of play it in between the rules, I guess. I also replaced Rex, the tightrope walker, and if I had to do it with somebody from today, I would go with Ansel Elgort, if I could put him in a time machine and send him back there. Seems like he could be a tightrope walker. But if I were to put somebody in the role of the tramp, I'd like to see what Bill Hader could do with that.
Ooh, that'd be interesting. Yeah.
He's very physically gifted, and I'd be curious to see if you gave him the bowler hat and the mustache and all that stuff to see what would Bill be able to do with that. So he'd be a much taller tramp because the tramp's kind of a little guy.
I could see that. I would love to see that. Oh man, yeah. This, you know what? I feel like that Chaplin movie with Robert Downey Jr. They didn't quite get it. I think it's an okay movie, but I would love to see a really, really great Charlie Chaplin biopic. And yeah, maybe Bill Hader. He could be a candidate for me.
As long as they focus on the on-screen performance, because I don't want to see Bill Hader be a total jerk for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it's interesting how they kind of gloss over that. So they reference it, but they kind of make it a weird madcap situation and not really like getting into the nitty-gritty of it, at least as far as and that was
good move.
At least, yeah.
Good move. Hating the protagonist is always a rough go for a movie. So, best shot of the movie, Peter.
You know what? I kind of tipped my hand earlier. The shot in the mirrors, the funhouse mirror shot. I think that is. I was really taken with that this time around. I had kind of forgotten about that before, but the fact that they make it so much that even the viewer doesn't really know who the real Chaplin is, or like what's a reflection and what's not. Even though like I kept watching it, trying to. It stayed on screen for such a long time, and I just kept getting fooled. And the fact that the camera doesn't even get picked up by the mirror, like how they positioned it in such a way, and you expect the cop to catch him, and he doesn't catch him. He like hits his head on the mirror. And then they come back to it and manage to go even further with it. They come back to the mirror like a couple minutes later. So yeah, that really like blew my mind. I know it's maybe that seems a little simple compared to what Chaplin does with the tightrope later on and a bunch of other things, but I was really taken by that in this go around. So.
No, that's good cinematography to not have your camera shot.
Yeah.
Jeff, what about you? Best shot.
I'm with Peter. My initial thought was how difficult it must have been to avoid the camera being in that shot. You get all those reflections of Charlie and the pickpocket. And I was astonished. It was a great shot. Kudos to them.
Yeah. You know, another one that really struck me as artistic, unexpected, and I didn't know that they could even do this back then. There's a scene where Charlie first encounters Rex, and he's angry and jealous of him, and he daydreams, and he has another negative translucent image of himself come out like it's like a double filming, and he gets out and he kicks the tightrope walker in his subconscious, and it was such a creative thing that, again, I did not expect that at all. So kudos to the mirror too. But this scene where he's like daydreaming and taking it out on Rex, I was surprised.
Go see 1922's The Phantom Carriage.
Okay.
It's a Swedish horror film, but they did a lot of that of the ghostly carriage that would ride up and interact with people.
Oh, so this isn't as groundbreaking as I thought it was, but nevertheless, I, not being familiar with this era of film, just saw that and had my mind blown.
Yeah, it was used to great effect. That was a fantastic pick.
And actually, if you watch The Kid from Chaplin's 1921 movie, he does something kind of similar in that as well. So that was, it might be just as simple as, I know nothing about filmmaking or about cinematography. I probably shouldn't speculate, but maybe they just like layered one shot on top of the other somehow. But yeah, it is kind of surprising that they were able to do that when so many other things weren't able to be done back then. So.
Right, like today it would be super easy, and computers and all that stuff, and it diminishes. But when I mentioned this, like on the Wizard of Oz episode, when you see what they do and it looks as good as it does, even though it's not perfect, even if it looks as good as it does, and you think these guys had to do this without computers to figure out how to do this with film and exposures, and it's just massive appreciation for that.
Yeah, it's so much more tangible in a way. It's like you feel the effort right there behind it. So yeah, it's
for
wonderful.
Sure.
Okay.
What's your favorite scene in the movie, Peter?
Well, I think the tightrope walk. Wow, I did not expect that to be so hard to say. You got to hand it to him. I don't know if we've mentioned this, but that he had this as per usual. He did like 50 to 100 takes for it. Like finally got it right. He had it. He probably had a net under him. He did, but he trained like crazy to get this to happen. And they finally got it right after, like we said, the circus took forever to make, with like extremely stress inducing. And they went to edit it, and there was a giant scratch in the print. So they had to do it all over again. And according to Chaplin, what they shot before was not as good as what ended up in the movie. So but hey, what ended up in the movie is still pretty amazing and legendary. And the fact that he did that and learned how to do that for the sake of telling this story is super admirable. And I'm totally all in on the tightrope walk.
Yeah, absolutely. Chad, what is your best scene?
My scene is also going to involve mischievous animals, but I'm going with the lion cage scene, and particularly when this little dog starts barking and the lion's sleeping and Charlie's trying to get it to knock it off, and he sticks out his leg, or I think it was his arm. Yeah, it was his leg. The dog latches onto his leg and he's trying to shake it off, and the dog's just going absolutely bananas. And the lion just kind of rolls over, goes back to sleep. Then Charlie goes to pet it, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, no. The lion roars and he jumps up a pole. This entire scene, there were some great acrobatics on the pole, and then just the comedy is just layer on layer. At the very end, there's this small little kitten to cap off this scene, and the kitten meows and it scares him after this huge lion that he was about to pet. So it's just a great layering of comedy.
So for my best scene, this movie peaks early. I love the pickpocket scene, the sequence with him having the wallet stuck in his pocket and he shouldn't have, the other guy going back for it, and them pursuing each other, them running, and then they realize they're running in parallel with each other. They go into the fun house. They come out into, like your point, Chad, they're part of this animatronic kind of display on this ship, and like he's doing this mechanical motions, and there's a lot of really great stuff on there. So it peaks really early for me, but I really enjoyed this scene, and lot of good moments within this scene.
The guy falling over after being repeatedly bonked on the head to break the cover.
Yeah.
You have to wonder if that's the Tramp's plan. Like he does the bonking on the head thing because he knows that will eventually knock the guy out and he'll be okay. That's just so it's fantastic. And the way the Tramp moves in that moment, I could swear he's like standing on a turntable or something, but no, he is actually using his body to look like he's like turning to the left in a perfectly like coordinated manner. It's incredible.
Peter, if you could change one thing in the circus, what would it be?
I would like to see more scenes between the Tramp and the girl. I would like to see a little bit more development there and bring a little bit more humanity out of it. That's, if I were to say there's one thing lacking about the circus compared to some of his other movies, I feel like there's not quite enough development in that relationship, even though, yeah, it is supposed to be like this really fast, like really quick, like falling in love situation. But his other movies do that too. And I believe it a little more in his other movies. And I think this could have used a little more of that. And, that's probably where it's only 72 minutes. That's probably where that extra 10 minutes went. So yeah, that's probably where I'm with that.
Good choice. Now, Chad, what would your change one thing be?
Even though the scene was really great, it featured capuchin monkeys and undressing the Tramp on a high wire, I still think the final trapeze scene went on a bit too long for my taste. So just some trimming there. I felt like it went on for 7-8 minutes, something like that, and it just needed condensed a little.
Okay, and so mine is going to be kind of along the lines of what Peter said. I think we need to become better acquainted with Rex, the tightrope walker. We need to like him. because he's part of the happy ending, or the kind of happy ending. The ending had both Mary and I sitting there and going like, wait, what? And you as Peter pointed out, the tramp's got to move on to his next adventure. He can't come out on top and get the girl and go on. But we don't really like Rex. I mean, in one, like we mentioned, like there's this ghost image of him kicking him, and we don't really like him. There's nothing wrong that he does per se. We don't know where he goes missing on his job, and we don't see a lot of chemistry between the two of them other than, oh, you're a girl, you have girl parts, I'm a guy, I have guy parts, we must love each other. So, I'd like to see something, like maybe Rex does something for her that makes her like him and give him some redeeming qualities. To your point, Peter, that human dimension, which is apparently a trademark of Chaplin's work. I don't think we really see it here, and it makes the ending kind of make me scratch my head and go, what is this ending?
That was a weird thing that it was never explained where Rex was.
Day drinking.
Probably.
I mean, the tramp is just such the focus. Like they don't. I guess he doesn't want to spend a lot of time with the other characters. He just wants it to be about his journey. And yeah, if the tramp can't come out on top, it just gets to a point where it kind of, Ray and I just talked about the movie Roxanne, and I think it's just kind of thing like he just cares so much for this woman. He just wants her to be happy, and he decides that being with Rex is what will make her happiest. Whether he's right or not, I guess is we that can be debated, but he sees Rex and decides that they should be together, and so he's going to help her do that. Just like he does everything that he can to help his other female love interests in his movies, and it's a sad, bittersweet ending. But that's him, like walking off into the distance with that iris focus and the way a lot of his movies end, and it's his trademark.
Now, this is a hard thing to do with a movie like this, but let's try and do it anyway. What's your best quote of the movie, Peter?
Yeah, I can't even really say best quote. Did you guys come up with a best quote? I mean,
I forced myself to, but Chad, did you come up with anything?
I did, yes. There's a great quip from the ringmaster when he's talking to one of the property men, sending the tramp up, do the tightrope routine, and the guy says he'll kill himself. And the property manager responds with, "That's all right, I have him insured."
Yeah, that's a good one.
That is a good one. I just simply liked when they were booing the other clowns and stuff like that. They wanted to see the tramp, who's not really part of the act, brought back on. And they said, "Bring on the funny man."
Right.
If you don't have a best quote, Peter, I do not hold it against you.
Yeah, I gotta sit this one out, unfortunately.
It's a square peg in a round hole. We're trying to make it fit. Chad beat it into submission the best, though.
That was pretty good. Yeah, that is a line that definitely stuck in my head as well. So yeah, it's a good one.
Now, Peter, where can the listeners hear you again?
Oh, folks, you can always hear me every week on Retro Reviews, which, we talk about movies from 1980 to 2010. It's available pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. If you use Stitcher, Podbean, SoundCloud, Spotify, it's all over the place. So yeah, Retro Reviews. I do it with my co-host Ray Castillo Jr. And yeah, hope you guys give us a listen. It's
a great companion piece for Retro Movie Roundtable. So if you like one, you'll like the other. I think they're different too. So it's not like even if you see the same movie, they're handled in a different way. On a 5-star scale, half-star intervals, what would you rate The Circus, Peter?
The Circus, I would give 4.5 out of 5 stars. I'm like I said, I'm a big Chaplin head. This isn't my favorite. It's not my least favorite. It's about the middle as far as Chaplin's directing features go. And I think it's one that seems, like I said, kind of been forgotten over the years, and I think it deserves to be held in perfectly high esteem, right next to City Lights and Modern Times. So.
Nice. And Chad, what would you rate The Circus?
I'm gonna go 4.5 as well. I think you hit the crux of what's keeping it from being a 5. The whole Rex storyline is just resolved and wrapped up very quickly and kind of odd, but otherwise it's a charming, fun movie that I had a great time with.
I really struggled with how to rate this one. Like I said, it almost felt like I didn't watch a movie for Retro Movie Roundtable, in the sense that, like, as we know cinema today. It's just such a different cinematic experience for me. And this whole silent movie world is very different for me. For instance, I had seen Metropolis and I love it, and it's still my favorite silent movie. But I mean, everything else that I've seen in the silent movie world, they're short, and there's a limited depth that you can get in with this. So with the Circus, some of my gripes about I didn't feel that connection to the characters. And the other thing was, I mentioned this earlier, I feel like we peaked early. Like, I really, really thought like we were high energy, and I even kind of was like, oh man, we're in great shape here. This is off to a fantastic start. And I felt like we hit some lulls along the way, and I didn't feel like the conclusion picked it up in the end for me. So we're right when I needed some energy, it left me scratching my head and a little bit unfulfilled. So I gave it a 3.5, and I feel bad for doing that because I've enjoyed studying the history of this. Am I a bad person?
Yes, no, you're not a bad person. No, I totally get that. That's totally fair. And, honestly, I am loving that you both kind of, I was able to inadvertently introduce you to a Charlie Chaplin features. I hope this convinces you to watch more, because I think, like I said, he's done better work. I think if you watch some of his others, that they might actually rectify your qualms with this one, which is why I gave it 4.5. I felt like there are plenty of others I would give 5 to, which definitely fill those gaps that you were mentioning. So
I'm intrigued to move on to, in particular, The Kid and The Gold Rush are two that have caught my eye that I think I would like to move on to next.
They're great. Yeah, the two that came before this. So yeah, those you can pretty much go in order with those. So yeah.
All right. Well, Chad, do you want to help me pick a movie for next time?
I'm excited.
All right. We're going to go old, but not... Actually, that's going to be brand spanking new compared to this. But so we've got 3 Audrey Hepburn movies here for today. Chad, are you ready for these? Option number 1, Sabrina from 1944. A playboy becomes interested in the daughter of his family's chauffeur, but his more serious brother, who would be the better man for her. Option 2, Charade from 1963. Romance and suspense ensue in Paris as a woman is pursued by several men who want a fortune for her murdered husband had stolen. Whom can she trust? Option 3, Roman Holiday from 1953. Bored and sheltered princess escapes her guardians and falls in love with a newsman in Rome.
I've never seen a Katharine Hepburn movie, so
not quite.
Or Audrey.
Yeah.
I knew I'd messed that up.
There you go.
I've never seen either of their movies, actually. But yeah, so I agree, Pat. Audrey Hepburn. I want to see Roman Holiday.
So we're ready to introduce ourselves to Audrey Hepburn and Roman Holiday from 1953. Check that out next time. Peter, thank you for coming on the show, man. We enjoyed having you on, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
And Chad, thank you.
Thank you.
Remember, all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, we invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you, so subscribe, rate, and review to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast. Those reviews help make the show better, and they help others find the show, and we love that. Give us a like on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at @movie_retro, email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. And, producing and providing this podcast is fun, but not free. We invite you to support the show at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/Retro Movie Roundtable. Any contributions are appreciated, and they will always go into the show to making it better. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Chet?
The whole point to the little fellow is that no matter how down on his backside he is, no matter how well the jackals succeed in tearing him apart, he's still a man of dignity.